Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Last Honest Realtor. I'm your host, David Fleming. Thank you for joining me today as we delve into statistics and numbers. And I feel like I might have just lost a couple of people. No, seriously though, statistics and numbers, they may not be your favorite topic, but give me a little bit of leeway here. What I want to talk today about is measures of the market. And all too often, we look at headlines or we read newspaper articles that have some very basic knowledge or some knowledge to bestow upon the viewer or the listener, which is just simply things like the market's hot, the market's not, the market's up, the market's down. And as I continue to say, and one of my favorite sayings is, you can make numbers say anything you want. So the issue I've always had with media headlines is that they are clickbait and they don't really tell the whole story. What I want to do today is I want to give you 10 statistics or 10 numbers that you should keep an eye on if you're interested in the real estate market. Now, these 10 statistics, 10 numbers will be in sort of question form because, of course, if you're familiar with Toronto Realty blog, I had proposed a contest earlier this month, basically following up the contest that I did in 2024. So I'll say this, not to segue into Toronto Realty blog, but listen, I've been writing it since 2007, and there's a lot of regular readers, a lot of regular commenters. There's some back and forth between us. And last year, I just sort of said, hey, let's have a contest about interest rates. Why don't we have a game? It'll be fun, and I'll give the winner a $200 gift card. And it was fun. And I had 20 entrants. Basically, the three questions were very simple. What is the date of the first Bank of Canada interest rate cut? How many basis points will that first cut be? And how many cumulative basis points will be cut by the end of 2025? So as I said, I had about 20 people submit, and by submit, I mean make a comment on Toronto Realty blog, submit their responses, and we kept track of it all year. It was a lot of fun. So I said coming into this year, and a lot of the readers said, are we going to have another game? What's the contest going to be? I said, okay, let's up the stakes and let's get real, and let's talk about sales, prices, inventory, absorption rate, interest rates, the condo market. Let's put that all into one game. And I posted this on Toronto Realty blog offering 10 questions. And so far, I think there's been about 6 or 7 entrants. So I want to turn that into our story today, our podcast today. And essentially, I want to explain why I've chosen these 10 metrics, these 10 measures of the market, or these 10 statistics to evaluate the 2025 market, both where we are right now and moving forward. So over the last little while, there's been a lot of talk about Donald Trump and tariffs and politics and all this kind of stuff. And I don't want to sound cavalier. I don't want to just brush this off. But my basic thoughts are this, guys. The world continues to turn. I'm not going to be the guy that says, hey, everything will be fine. Real estate's going to continue to increase in price. Everybody buy, everybody sell. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not here to cheerlead. What I'm saying is that somebody that mentions they're looking for clarity, well, you can't just give yourself a timeline. Well, Donald Trump says by January 20th, we're going to know if there's tariffs. Okay, no, now it's February 1st, and now there's a 30-day reprieve. Listen, the only certainty is uncertainty. We have Donald Trump in office for 4 years, or maybe forever. Yeah, more on that later. We, of course, have an election in the province of Ontario. We have a federal election. We have do we have a prime minister or not? He has stepped down. Is he leaving? There's a lot of uncertainty, and that is the only certainty. And so while a lot of other real estate agents are posting about tariffs and buy Canadian and stuff like that, look, I'm not interested in any of that right now. What I'm interested in is what is actually happening in the real estate market, and today we will go through these statistics. So my very first statistic, guys, is simply the average home price for 2025. What will that be? Now, on the blog, we had done sort of a prediction. What do you think it's going to be? And I'll say this, if you are a stats person and if you are in any way familiar with Toronto real estate, you might know that we measure by month and we measure by year. Now, there are so many different variations of this, and I don't want to get into it, but you have the TREB average home price, but you can also have Toronto's average home price, call that the 416, or York's, or Halton's, or Durham's, right? You can have the home price index. You can break it down by detached or by condo. What we're talking about is the overall GTA average home price. This on a monthly basis peaked in February of 2022 at $1,334,000 and change. Since then, we have not approached that number. And since then, I continue on Toronto Realty Blog to measure it every single month. Now, the average home price on a yearly basis is a completely different statistic, and it's one that you have to actually dig for as you look through the TREB archives. Now, I'll give you some numbers here. 2020, the average home price was $929,000. 2021, the average home price was $1,095,000. Think about that. The average home price went up about $160,000, $170,000 in a year. Now, our peak average home price came in 2022 when it was $1,190,000. You might say, well, David, you just mentioned the peak was $1,334,000. Again, that was in February of 2022. That was a monthly statistic. So when you break down all of the sales, tens or in some case over 100,000 sales, the average in 2022, which was the peak, was $1,190,000. In 2023, it was $1,126,000, and in 2024, it was $1,127,000. So the first question that I would propose is this: where will the average home price go in 2025? Now, we can look on a monthly basis, which we will in a moment, because that's another measure of the market they want to explore. But in 2024, with the average home price down moderately, I don't have the percentage here, but this looks like maybe around 1% to 2%, will we see the average home price increase? On a year-over-year basis, will we see it decrease? Now, that's all I'll say on question number one, measure of the market number one, because of course we won't know this until January of 2026. But if we move on to my second point, my second measure of the market, which month of the year will represent the highest average home price? Now, this is a simple enough question. One of my favorite, I'm a stats nerd. I don't know if anyone could tell, obviously. I was going to say one of my favorite stats or spreadsheets, if you will, is this matrix I have of the GTA average home price, the yearly peak. Now, from 2015 to 2024, we have never seen a peak in January. We have never seen a peak in December. We've never seen a peak in July. We've never seen a peak in August. Okay. Interestingly enough, we've also never seen a peak in March. So I mentioned the peak of the overall market on a monthly basis came in 2022, in February at $1,334,000 and change. That is the only time we've seen a peak in February. We've had one peak in April. We've had 3 peaks in May, 1 in June, 2 in October, and 2 in November. Okay. Now, statistically, it would seem that May is the most often. This is a 10-year period, and the peak came in May 3 times. Now, if you were to look at spring versus fall, we had 2 Octobers and 2 Novembers. And in fact, the peak, if I'm looking at this correctly, 2019, October, 2020, October, 2021, November. So for a 3-year period, we had a fall peak. But we have not had a fall peak since 2021. In fact, the fall of 2022, 2023, and 2024 were all really, really slow. So when is the peak going to take place in 2025? This, again, is the second measure of the market that if you're interested in real estate, you should be monitoring. So monitor this, guys. And by the time you watch this podcast or listen to it, we will have the January statistic for average home price. Will that price have gone down from December? Because that happened last year, and it was absolutely fascinating. December is a depressed market. How could the average home price be lower in January? That was what I wrote on my blog last year, and that was fascinating to me. Now, you should see the average home price ramp up in February and in March and in April and then into May. We have had 2 years in a row our peak in May, 23 and 2024. Most people think June is the peak. But the issue with June, and if you're a seller and you think June is the time, you want to pay very close attention to this, most people have already bought. How many people bought in Jan, Feb, March, April, and May? It's a lot. It's 5/6 of the spring market. It's funny, we call it the spring market. It actually starts in winter, goes through spring and into summer. But point being, in the 6 months to begin the year, most people buy. Most people, right, if you were to look at statistically, I would say that in the first half of the year, probably 65% of the sales take place. So within those first 5 months, a ton of people buy, and then you're into June when inventory peaks and sales are down and most people have bought. So no, I don't think that's the best time to sell as a seller. But I'll sum this one up to say I believe that the peak this year will be in the fall. I think that the uncertainty we've discussed would probably lead to a lot of people sitting on the sidelines, both buying and selling in February, March, April, May. And I do think that with rates decreasing, and because we've had 3 slow falls in a row, my money would probably be on October, November. Now, the third measure of the market, very simply a yes or no. Will any individual month's average home price top $1,200,000? Now, the reason I think this is important is because, as noted, and you've heard this, 15 times in the first few minutes here, the peak average home price in the GTA was in Feb 2022, and it was $1,334,000. Now, in May of 2022, we had an average home price over 1.2 million, and we have not had one since. Now, why 1.2? Why is that this number that I keep talking about? Well, in 2023, I was asking a question on my blog. Will we see the average home price top 1.2 million? That was coming out of a 2022 where we had this ridiculous peak in Feb. And then basically through the fall of 2022, we couldn't hit 1.1. And I thought, well, the market's going to rebound. Forget about 1.1. Can we hit 1.2 in the spring of 2023? We almost did. May of 2023, 1,196,101. Just a hair under, less than $4,000. And then we continued to see, as we typically do, a slowdown through summer. It popped back up in the fall, but never got back to that number or even close. Coming into 2024, I asked the same thing. Will we top 1.2 million? The peak this time, also coming in May, as just noted, was only 1,165,000. And then in the fall, we topped out in October, 1,135,000. So not even close. And again, I'm asking, as a measure of the market, do you believe we'll see an average home price over 1.2 million at any point in any of the 12 months? Thank you, David. There's 12 months in the calendar. But in any of the 12 months of the year, will we see the price top 1.2 million? Now, my vote was yes. I do believe that will happen. I thought it was going to happen each of the last 2 years, so I'm tripling down now. But again, I think that as momentum builds throughout the year, and as we continue to see interest rates decline, which they will, especially now with all this uncertainty, that's going to be the new word, I do think the Bank of Canada will cut the interest rate on the scheduled announcement for March 6th. And I do think that we will see not only a busy fall, a return to a seller's market in most segments, but also we will top that $1,200,000 figure. Now, measure of the market number 4. How many total sales will there be in 2025? So this one's fascinating to me, guys, and I talked about this a lot in 2024. We peaked in terms of sales. In the year 2021, there was 121,712 sales. It's the most ever. And then in 2022, we only saw 75,000. That's a massive decline. Now, history will show that through COVID, not only did people start to realize why they wanted to move and where they wanted to move into the city, out of the city, from a condo to a house to a condo, but also historically low interest rates certainly added some fuel to that fire. Regardless, when the market rolled off of this peak in Feb of 2022, we saw a huge slowdown. There were only 75,000 sales in 2022. There was 65,877 in 2023, the lowest all time. And I say all time. Did I mention I'm a stats nerd? I'll probably reuse that joke about 20 times. I say lowest all time. I keep stats from 2002 onwards. Why 2002? If you're a regular reader of the blog, well, that is when the districts changed and we have a data set from them that is reliable. Anything before that, not so much. But also because you got to draw a line in the sand somewhere. How big was the city 23 years ago? So it's one thing to compare 2025 to 2002 when the city was half the size. It's another thing to go back to the 70s or the 80s or 90s. So regardless, when I say all time, I mean since 2002. So 2023, those sales, 65,877, that's a little more than half of the sales in 2021. Now, last year in 2024, I continued to write, and I do on Toronto Realty blog every single month. I take a look back at the TREB stats from the month before, and I'm definitely looking at price, but I'm really also looking at sales. Sales is a measure of the market, how many people are selling. Of course, it's a function of how many people have listed for sale, and we will touch on inventory. And of course, what is the percentage of properties that sell? Absorption rate, that's a huge measure of the market. We will come back to that. But how many sales are there? Really, really good figure. Talk to me about price? Sure. But talk to me about the number of transactions. And so to see last year, we started slowly and we built up on a year over year basis. And again, when you're comparing to the slowest year of all time, you say, well, sales were up last month, 12% year over year. Right. They were up over the lowest ever. So I also write this e-newsletter that I send out every month. And I would always say, hey, listen, sales were up 20%, May over May. That sounds great, but you're up 20% over the lowest ever. So sales were up 20%, but this just means it's the second slowest May ever because last year was the slowest May ever. And that was the theme of the year. And of course, last year we saw 67,809 sales. Like a 2% increase from the fewest ever. So again, the question that I had was how many total sales will there be in 2025? So let's say there's 80,000 sales. You get a point so long as your guess falls between that 4% metric, which happens to be 76,800 and 83,200. It's a lot of numbers, David. Point being, if you can get within a 4% band, I give you a check mark per the TRB contest. So for your edification, just watching or listening to this, my fourth measure of the market is the number of sales. Very important to note, and we will get this data point from January. I think it is going to show really, really low sales volume. I do. I think we're going to see as few sales as we saw in 2024 or fewer. That is really, really important going forward. Now, the fifth measure of the market here. Which month of the year will represent the highest number of total sales? Pretty simple. And if you look back historically, again, you would see that most of the sales will typically come in an April or a May. That's when we peak. I am curious to know, because I have gone on record saying that I think the fall is going to be busy, that I think we're going to see the average home price at the highest in the fall, and that, of course, I think that we'll hit 1.2 million for an average home price on a monthly basis in the fall. I wonder if we will see the most sales in an October or a November. So when I posted this in the blog, I didn't provide any hints or any matrix for anybody, as I did with a lot of these other statistics. And so far, a lot of the folks have been guessing fall. I think there's a lot of people out there that, like me, believe we're going to have this mixed market, Feb, March, April, May, which are typically really busy months. And I think that you're going to have a summer slowdown as you usually do. But, and again, knock on wood, I'd like to think this uncertainty from the south of the border is starting to clear up a little bit. Are we going to have a 4-year trade war? I don't know. But we have a federal election that could come in the spring. It could come in the fall. We have a provincial election that will be over by the time we hit March 1. So it is going to be a very interesting year. And as I was saying earlier, I'm not going to choose to live in fear. I'm not going to circle dates on my calendar of when the tariff deadline is. We all have to live our lives. But I do think that there's a lot of folks right now, and to be honest, we just got an email this morning from somebody that was going to sell a property, and they said, listen, we don't want to do it right now. And again, kudos to them. If they want to wait a month and see if the dust settles, the clouds part, whatever analogy you want to use, the certainty that they're looking for. Certainty in an uncertain time. So that's number 5. Which month of the year will represent the highest number of total sales? That is my 5th measure of the market. My 6th measure of the market, again, is about sales, and it is this. And another data point. As noted, I'm curious to know if we will see an average home price beat 1.2 million. I'm also curious to see if we will have any month beat 8,000 sales. So I did this on the blog. I looked at sales from 2021, which was the most ever, as noted, 121,000. Every single month of 2021, minus the bookends of January and December, saw over 8,000 sales. We had, you ready for this, 15,652 sales in March of 2021. That's just an absurd amount of sales. Considering last year there were only 67,000 sales in total, to see at 4 years ago, you had almost 16,000 sales in 1 month. It's mind-blowing. You can't imagine what it was like to work in that market. So again, 10 of the 12 months in 2021 saw over 8,000 sales. Now, here's my question to you, the viewer or the listener. How many months of 12, thank you again, David, how many months out of the 12 months in 2024 saw 8,000 sales or more? Throw out a guess. 0. Did you guess 0? You might have, if you were thinking. You might have just thrown out a number. You might have, focused on driving or whatever you're doing right now. But 0 months in 2024. The most sales in any month in 2024, 7,114 in April, which is hilarious because in 2021, that would have been the 10th most. So that was last year. And again, as we noted, that is the second fewest number of sales since I've been charting this data in 2002. So why I chose 8,000, again, it's a somewhat random number, but it's a round number. And it speaks to the fact that in 2024, we saw 0 months with 8,000 plus sales. Now, what about 2023? How many times in 2023 did we see over 8,000 sales? I'll give you a moment to guess again. It's not 0. I just gave that away. Okay, it's 1. I really didn't give you any time to guess there, but I figured you might think, well, here's the pattern. It's going to be 0 again. No, it was 1. It was once. We saw 1 month in 2023 with over 8,000 sales, and that was in May. And in 2022, we only saw 8,000 plus sales in February and March. So let's regroup. 2021, 10 times. 2022, twice. 2023, once. 2024, 0. Do you see a pattern here? 10, 2, 1, 0. If the pattern continues, you're going to say, no, David, we're not going to see 8,000 sales in any given month in the calendar year of 2025. Again, that is my measure of the market for you to watch. Now, perhaps I should have started this by saying TREB Market Watch. Google that. Toronto Real Estate Board Market Watch. TREB Stats. Or you could, I don't know, read my blog or sign up for the East newsletter. But if you're interested in real estate, whether you're a buyer, whether you're a seller, and I assume you're listening to this or watching this because you want high-level data more than just a Toronto Star article saying, market slows last month. You want data. You want measures of the market. You want to pay attention. You want to look ahead, not just in the rearview mirror. These are the measures of the market you need to be aware of. 8,000 sales in a given month. Will we top that? It's incredibly important. So that is my 6th measure of the market. My 7th, we're going to go on to inventory. Now, a word about inventory. There are 2 terms in real estate. One is new listings. One is active listings. New listings, well, you get a new listing when a property is listed for sale. The irony is the word new, well, if it's a relist, it counts as a new listing. So let's say you list a property in January. You terminate it. You relist it later in January. It counts as 2 new listings. Don't get me started on that. There is a statistic for the relist share. I told you I'm a stats nerd. Did I tell you that yet? But what I want to do is differentiate between new listings and active listings. New listings are when a property is listed for sale, check. Active listings is a static number at the end of every month. How many properties are on the market at the last day of the month? Now, why these are different and why they're important, I will get to in a moment. But our 7th measure of the market, how many new listings will there be in 2025? So in my blog contest, I said you have to be within 5%. That's a really tough number. But again, is it? Because, and again, this is a lot of data I'm going to throw at you right now, but just try to hear what I'm saying in these numbers. The year 2018, 78,000 new listings. 2019, 87,000. 2020, 156,000. Think back to grade 12 economics, supply, demand, draw on X, right? Think about what happens in a market when inventory accumulates or when inventory skyrockets. If sales are moving at the same rate, nothing happens to price. Now, of course, on the flip side of the argument I was about to create, if sales increase at a higher rate than inventory, well, then prices increase. But look what happened. 2018, 78,000 new listings. 2019, 87,000 new listings. And in 2020, 156,000 new listings. That is because of how many people moved during COVID. 2021, 166,000 new listings. Now, that was the peak. But 2022, 152,000. 2023, 141,000. And then up again significantly in 2024, 164,000. So here's where, guys, I want to make this point, and I hope this is conveyed if you are listening. A lot of numbers. I mentioned that the most sales ever occurred in 2021. Also the most listings ever. Last year we had the second most listings ever, the second fewest sales ever. That speaks to the absorption rate and how properties are being absorbed by the market. So think of a fictitious market. Let's say that you have whether it's cars or widgets, as they say in business school. Let's say that you have 10 items for sale. There's only one buyer. Or let's say there's 10 vendors vying for that one buyer. It's definitely a buyer's market. Sellers are going to have to fight each other. They're going to have to drop prices. They're going to have to incentivize. Now, let's say that in that market where there are 10 vendors with 10 items, 10 products, there are 13 buyers. Well, you can see where this is going. So in the context of our market measures, I want you to pay attention to the number of new listings that there are this year. And in terms of trying to guess how many there will be, again, in my game, I said within a 5% band, I would think that there will be very close to the same number as last year. There could be more, and we could set an all-time record because, of course, the all-time record was only about 2,000 more than we saw last year. There could be less, but it won't be significantly less. And so why you want to measure the number of new listings per month if you're trying to pay attention to the market because you're a buyer and trying to time the market, you're a seller and trying to time the market, or you're just a total dork like me who continuously makes spreadsheets of every single sports statistic in existence, even sports you don't watch like auto racing, and for some reason you feel the need to update the spreadsheet and then print it off and keep it in a booklet by your bed that you read when you can't sleep. All of that is true. No, I love stats. What can I say? And so if you are in the same camp, you're very curious to know how many new listings will there be this year. So another measure of the market, and now we're going to move to active listings. Why is active listings important? Active listings speaks to the absorption rate. So again, I go back to this fictitious product where you have 10 vendors selling 10 products and you have 13 buyers for it. Okay, well, prices are going to increase. You have 10 vendors selling 10 products and you have one buyer. Well, it's a race to the bottom. So in 2024, we saw 20,000 active listings. That's the number left at the end of the month. We saw this 7 straight months. That's huge. So again, me being the stats nerd that I am, I update my spreadsheet every single month when the Treb stats come in. I've been doing this since 2002. We saw in 2004, we're going way back. In 2004, we saw 8 straight months with 20,000 active listings. Okay. 2005, 2006, 2008 saw 9 straight months. So that speaks to what the absorption rate was like 20 years ago and why prices were as low as they were. But remember when I said in 2021, we saw the highest sales ever and the highest new listings ever. Now, remember when I said in 2018, there were only 78,000 new listings. Again, I'm switching gears between new and active. This is neat. Are you ready for this? In 2020, we saw 0 months with 20,000 plus active listings. 0 in 2021, 0 in 2022, and 0 in 2023. So again, that speaks to how the inventory is being absorbed. Going back to 2004, as I mentioned, there were 8 straight months with 20,000 plus active listings. Then in 2024, last year, we saw 7 straight months with 20,000 active listings. But why is it that between 2020 and 2023, there were 0 months? Because the inventory was being absorbed. So at the end of every single month, Treb counts the number of properties listed for sale. That is the number of active listings. So if there's 10 new listings in a month and 10 properties sell, well, it's a pretty efficient market. Everything's selling and prices are going to skyrocket. But if you look at the absorption rate and the 50% threshold, theoretically, under 50% absorption rate signifies a buyer's market. Over 50% signifies a seller's market. Now that changes by segment, it changes by month, but historically we've seen some absolutely wild months where the absorption rate's at 78%. That's peak. That's February of 2022. That is speaking to how little is on the market. Last year, second highest number of new listings of all time, with the second fewest number of sales. So that's why the inventory accumulates, and you start to see at the end of every month 20,000 plus active listings sitting on the market. So to me, that's another measure of the market. And I said on the Toronto Realty blog, place your bets. How many months will we see in 2025 with 20,000 plus active listings? I believe I said there would be 6 because last year there were 7 straight months. That was a lot. May through November. So how quickly will inventory be absorbed? Now, you want to know all of this, and I'll summarize. I have 2 more points, my measures of the market. You want to understand price just by looking at it. But if you really want to understand price and what's happening to it, you want to look at sales. You want to look at inventory being new listings, and inventory being, as we just mentioned, active listings. And this is where I find statistics so fascinating. So my 9th measure of the market, and we had to go specifically to the condo market because, and I will say this, even though we have as many as 10 condo listings in the queue right now, I am having real conversations with these sellers. Hey, Mr. Seller, the condo market is not spectacular right now. And, let me lead with that. And what I'm trying to do is, I don't want to say weed out because that sounds rude. I want to set expectations. So I did have a phone call, and this sounds like a politician saying like, I ran into this couple at the local mall, but I did have a phone call last week with somebody that said they want to sell their condo. I said, great, I'll come by, I'll chat. And then, he said, well, listen, we don't need to meet yet. I just want to know, what you think you can get for it. So I kind of know where this is going. I said, okay, let me look it up. I start digging online. I looked at this condo. I think it's probably worth about $650 or something. And I said, okay, so what do you think it's worth? He says, well, I'm not going to sell unless I get 800. That was my pen dropping. If you're listening to this and not watching, I could have used a microphone there or a drum roll or something, but this is real conversation, real number. He said, I'm not selling if I don't get 800,000. And I said, and I didn't mean to be rude as a gut reaction. I said, oh, well, then you're not selling. And he said, excuse me? And I said, sorry, was that not, 800? He says, well, a friend of mine owns the same unit and he's 8 floors up and, he sold for 790. So I'm looking at MLS on my computer. I'm like, I don't see this. Oh, wait a minute. No, there's no way this guy's, he is. He's looking back 3 years. So I move my toggle from 2024 to 2022 and I look and I see his friend literally sold in April of 2022, just off the peak for 790,000. So what this gentleman is effectively saying is, hey, that all-time high real estate peak? I want to get more than that. I said to him, your condo's worth 650,000. He said he didn't want to meet me, and that was that. So, hey, listen, different strokes for different folks. If that guy wants a list for $800,000, no problem. It's not recommended. So long story short, and excuse the tangent in the story there, but these are some of the calls that I'm getting. And a lot of the calls I am getting are from people that are like, yeah, condo market's not great. I understand pricing. Let's move it out for reasons A, B, C, or D. Condo market is not great. I would divide the market right now into freehold and condo because they are going in very different directions. They are very different markets. So my measure of the market, number 9. The average condo price in the 416. This is a measure that I look at regularly, and not to say that the 905 is of less importance, but you would think in a major world-class city that the downtown core, well, that's always going to be hot, right? Not necessarily. Okay, you would think that if we're looking at the overall condo market in a metropolitan area, well, the downtown core, well, that's got to be hotter. That is why I look at the 416 condo market as a measure, because the expectation is that this should outperform the overall condo market and specifically the 905 condo market. So here is a figure for you, $767,064. That was the highest monthly condo price in the 416 in 2024. That was May of 2024. So on my blog, I asked the question, will any individual month of the year see an average GTA condo price, 416 condo price, higher than the peak price from May of 2024? Is it a yes or is it a no? Now, the all-time peak price was $831,531 in March of 2022. So relatively speaking, I got to be honest, that's not that bad a drop compared to what the overall market has done. Now, why would I say it's not that bad? Well, because if you look at the peak 416 condo price from March of 2022 to the high in 2024, it's only down 7.7%. If you compare that to the overall market, which of course includes condos, but the overall measure of the market is the GTA average condo price, in the same period, it's down 12.6%. So you might say condos are outperforming. Now, I personally believe it's going to be a tough year ahead for the condo market. So will any month of the year see a 416 condo price higher than the peak for May of 2024? I don't think so. That would be 764,064. We will see how the January figure looks by the time, as I mentioned, you watch or listen to this podcast. We will know, but I personally don't think that we are going to top that. So that's my ninth measure of the market. And even if you're not in the condo market, you could say, David, I have a $5 million house to sell. What the heck do I care about the condo market? Well, hey, listen, maybe not in the example of a $5 million house, but somebody that's selling a house for $1.4 million, which is historically an absolutely on fire price point, and right now seems to be very slow to take off. The reason you care is because the person buying it has a condo to sell. So don't tell me that this statistic doesn't apply to you. Now, when we had 3 listings on the east side in January, Chris was working the open house for one of our Leslieville listings, and he said that every buyer that came through there that was looking, they said, yeah, well, I got this condo I'd have to sell. And he said it was amazing because we usually assume a lot of people are in denial. I told you that story earlier about the gentleman that wanted $800,000 for a $650,000 condo. But he said a lot of the people that were chatting were saying like, yeah, I paid $7,000. It's probably worth, $650,000, $660,000. And they recognize that, yeah, they're going to be losing some money on that if they want to make a move now. Now, again, we can talk about the market going up and down and the idea that, yes, properties fluctuate in any market. Talk about that another day if you want to. So what I will say is this. You could wait it out and that condo will eventually be worth more than you paid for it. But if you see an opportunity in the freehold market and you say, I'm down $50,000 on my condo, but here's this house that in 2022 would have sold for $300,000 higher. Well, again, maybe that's where you net out. So to be determined, but point being, if you are a potential seller of a freehold home and you say, David, I don't care about your measure of the market, number 9, the average condo price, I am telling you, you need to, because the people looking to buy houses, a lot of them own and have to sell condos. Now, measure of the market number 10, well, we're back to interest rates. And I know I said that last year's contest on TRB was all about interest rates and this year's was going to be different. The first 9 measures of the market, sure, they're about prices, they're about new listings, they're about sales, they're about active listings, they're about the average condo price. The 10th measure of the market is simply this. Where will the Bank of Canada policy rate be at the end of 2025? Now, our trough for the Bank of Canada policy rate was 0.25% during COVID. That was low. Yeah, that was just about zero. Our peak was 5% in mid-2024. Unprecedented 10 straight rate hikes by the Bank of Canada. Now, we currently sit at 3% because we saw a cut of 25 basis points on January 29th by the Bank of Canada. This is on the heels of a 50 basis point cut in December of last year and a 50 basis point cut in October of last year. So you can do the math. We were at 5. We cut 25, 25, 25, 50, 50, and 25. Ergo 3%. Where will we see this rate by the end of the year? Now, I believe it was last week, could have been the week before, I was talking about the major banks, the Big 5 and National. I wonder if they like that. The Big 5 plus National. God, they wish we could call it the Big 6. So the Big 6 banks, you heard it here first, gave their predictions, and I believe the lowest prediction was 2%. The highest prediction was 3%. I think that was Scotia said 3%, and RBC, or Royal, it was one of those two, said 2%. Now we're sitting at 3%. So Scotia's prediction was basically, hey, we'll see one rate cut on January 29th and then nothing for the rest of the year. I think we can all agree that's extremely unlikely. Now, granted, all of these banks made their predictions before the Trump tariffs, which seemed to be in place for a day before he took it back. But now it's 30 days, and it's going to continue to dangle over us like a carrot for the rest of the year, or 4 years, or 40 years. When he rewrites the Constitution. No, but seriously, though, I think there will be more cuts because of what is happening in the United States and the relationship between the United States and Canada. I think we will see another cut on March 6th. I personally would say we'll be at 2%. But we had somebody in our office the other day that said that they thought it could hit as low as 1.5. Now, again, that's still 6 times what it was when it was 0.25% in COVID. But this is an interesting measure of the market because despite a tariff war, despite the idea or the reality of a recession, listen, homeownership rate is not at 100%. So while there could be a lot of people on tough times, if there is economic fallout from the U.S.-Canada relationship, if the variable rate mortgage drops to 3%, that's going to light a fire under the housing market. That is it. Those are your 10 measures of the market. What's happening with average home price? What is happening with sales? What is happening with new listings? What is happening with active listings? What is happening with the Bank of Canada policy rate? And of course, we did touch on the average condo price. Now, again, guys, the sort of thesis for this today is, and I'm going to be honest, I don't want this to come off as rude, but I feel like a lot of the newspaper headlines are just clickbait. And don't even get me started on like the blog TOs. Like blog TOs headline will be like, 0 persons ever buys real estate in falling market where properties are all worth negative money. And it's written by like a food critic. Actually, though, the people that read about real estate, former photographer and former food critic, or current. That's where you want to get your real estate news, from your food critic. I don't know anything about artisanal grilled cheese sandwiches, so I try not to write about them. I wish those folks would not try to write about real estate. And I'm not trying to cheerlead or pump the tires here. I can't wait to see the YouTube comments here. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of silly. Like they cater to a demographic of like really broke, angry Gen Z and millennials that just love to hate on real estate, you know? So there's that. I did an entire blog post once on this. So not that you're necessarily getting your news from Blog TO, but whether it's the Toronto Star, the Globe Mail, the National Post, the Toronto Sun, whatever other publication there is, it's not the most high level stuff. So if you want to go a little bit deeper, look at these statistics. They're here for you. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. You go and Google Treb Market Watch or Google Treb Stats or sign up for my e-newsletter or read my blog at the beginning of every month when I do a rundown of the numbers and look at average home prices and look at the number of new listings. Look at the number of sales. Look at the percentage in the relationship. As I've mentioned, that is going to affect price. And familiarize yourself with some of these statistics and, as I have defined them today, measures of the market. So that is it for me for this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube. Feel free to drop me a comment. Someone wrote last week, "You're too arrogant. You won't be my realtor. Bye-bye." And I thought, perfect. I mean, it's kind of the shtick, the Last Honest Realtor, with that really smarmy photo of me that Jonathan took where I look like my friend Amy said, "You look like you want to jump through the camera," and I'm not going to finish that thought. But anyways, yeah, that was kind of a funny comment. And again, it's a shtick, right? That photo was for a reason. But yes, I interrupted myself there. Please leave a comment on YouTube. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about these statistics. Please remember to like, comment, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. And we'll see you next week here on The Last Honest Realtor.